what I want to do is there's a pretty good video here. You guys know Steve Mold? Are you familiar? Anybody familiar with this guy at all?
No, no, no.
Nope.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
I've seen him. He does physics stuff. He's kind of like Action Lab, but not the same.
Yeah. He's kind of like that. He's really good. He's got excellent science experiments. And I want to show his description of resonance, which I think is really outstanding. And he does it by using a mechanical interface.
The bog standard description of resonance goes something like this. If you ping a wine glass or pluck a guitar string, then the note that you hear is the frequency that that object likes to vibrate at. It's that object's favorite frequency. It's the resonant frequency of that object. That's resonance. It's okay as a description, but I think I can do better. The best way I've found to describe resonance is using this thing. It's called a Rubens tube. It's a hollow aluminium tube. At one end, it's blocked off with a piece of wood. At the other end, it's blocked off with a rubber membrane. And if I tap that membrane with my finger, then that will send a pulse of pressure through the tube, traveling at the speed of sound. When the pulse reaches this end, some of it gets reflected and it travels back through the tube to here. And then when the pulse gets to here, some of it gets reflected and it travels back in this direction. So when I tap the rubber membrane, a pulse of pressure bounces backwards and forwards inside the tube, getting weaker and weaker and weaker until eventually it fades away to nothing. But what if I repeatedly tap the rubber membrane? So I tap the rubber, the pulse passes through the tube, it bounces off here, it comes back to here, and just as it reaches this side, I tap the membrane again. And now the pulse is even bigger than it was before because I've added to it. So now a larger pulse is traveling through the tube, it bounces back, gets to here. Just when it gets to here, I tap it a third time. And now the pulse is even bigger again. And if I keep doing that, if I keep tapping the rubber membrane at just the right time, the pulse will get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right. So essentially what he's doing is he is tapping that at just the right interval at the right frequency, right? Where the energy that he taps in with and the energy that's being reflected becomes additive, okay? And this is super important in resonance because this is not only how scalar waves can get built, but also, again, how amplifiers can work and stuff like that. Now, in the case of scalar waves, and this I'm going to take us off subject just a little bit here, but scalar waves are a little bit different. And this is another modality of the ether where, well, let me see. What's a good example for how a scalar wave works? Okay, here's a good example. Say I had a bunch of dominoes, right? And they're all different sizes and they're progressively getting bigger, right? So I have a normal size domino and then I have another one that's about a third bigger than that. And then another one's about a third bigger than that, and on so on and so forth, okay? Until eventually I get up to the size of a domino that um, is the size of a building, right? So what I can do, a good example of scalar wave, is to cause this directed resonance and amplification uh, by causing an additive type of effect to happen to the energy that is being dispersed. Like, for example, when I knock over one domino into the next domino, the next larger one, then it's because it's smaller, it's big enough that it's going to knock over the next domino and then the next one, the next one. And eventually, by the time you get up to the domino that is the size of a building, when it comes down, it's going to have the power of a bomb, essentially, right? That's behind it. And all we're doing is taking advantage of um, and a natural energy that is already found in nature. Um, right there. Ooh, and Zach just popped in. Hang on a second. All right. So anyway, so that's just another modality. But let's continue on with this with the tube here and hear how he describes this because this is really cool the way this works, and not to mention it's a pretty neat little piece of technology as well.
And that's resonance. Resonance is getting the timing just right, getting the frequency just right, so that the energy you put into the system adds to the energy that's already there. That's resonance. So the frequency of taps that I need to get, that's the resonant frequency of the column of air inside this tube. But it's not the only resonant frequency of the column of air. There are infinitely many. So, for example, if I tap the rubber membrane and a pulse goes into the tube, and then I tap it a second time, so now there are two pulses inside the tube. Look, they cross over like this. And then the third tap happens when the first tap gets back. Or I could tap the rubber membrane twice. So, one goes in, another one goes in there maybe, and then a third one goes in like that. And then the fourth tap doesn't happen until the first one gets back. But I'm still getting the timing just right so that the energy I put in adds to the energy that's already there. It's just that I've waited for a couple of taps to go in first. So what's that like when you've got pulses coming in from this direction and the reflected pulses coming back and they're crossing over each other? It looks like this. So the waves coming from both directions, they cross over each other and they add together. And when you add them together, you get something called a standing wave, where you have nodes and antinodes. The nodes are the points where there's no movement, and the antinodes are the points where there's lots of movement. So the waves coming from both directions, they cross over each other and they add together. And when you add them together, you get something called a standing wave, where you have nodes and antinodes. The nodes.
Okay, that's what it was, a standing wave. So some people say that light is a particle, right? Other people say light is a wave. Some people say light has properties of both. But the more I look at this, the more I think that honestly that there are no particles. And I have reason for saying that. And that may sound as crazy as saying there's no waves. But it just seems to me that a wave is how everything communicates. It's how we interface with our brain. It's electricity in the form of a wave that does the communication. And in the creation of the universe, doesn't seem like an awful waste of stuff to have all of this particulate matter out there, when really all it needs to be is virtual in the first place. So one thing that he talks about here is called a standing wave. And what happens is when these waves meet each other and they are at not opposition, but they are in phase with each other, they can cause a standing wave. Okay, and that standing wave could be akin to something that you can feel, kind of like when you take two north ends of a magnet and you push together. That's essentially causing two standing waves of like waves to be forced against each other, and you can actually feel something there, right? You feel the magnetic push, right?